This webinar is titled Christopher Columbus, a quick overview of his 4 voyages, and we saw this map at the end of our last seminar. And for this webinar, I'm going to particularly rely on historian David Barton and Bill Federer and their excellent history on these works and these voyages. Well, Voyage 1 in 1492 was a voyage of discovery. This was the first of Columbus's 4 voyages to the New World. It was one of discovery. No person from the continent of Europe had ever seen that part of the world before, and it likewise was the first time native peoples had met anyone from Europe. Thinking he had made it to India, he referred to the inhabitants as Indians, and the name stuck. It's interesting to consider that Native Americans might never have been called Indians had it not been for Islamic Jihad cutting off the land trade routes to India. These first inhabitants were the peaceful Taino natives. Columbus thought that Cuba was the tip of China and that the Dominican Republic was Japan. Returning to Europe, Columbus' ship, Santa Maria, hit a reef off the coast of the Dominican Republic and was wrecked on December 24th, 1492. He left 39 sailors in a makeshift fort. In 1493, we would call this, Voyage 2, one of settlement, bringing more ships and people. Although Columbus had been named governor of the new outpost, many Spaniards on this trip resented an Italian giving them orders and openly resisted his leadership. Columbus stayed 3 years before returning to Spain. It's worthy noting on the second voyage, Columbus was frustratingly saddled with 17 ships and 1,500 mostly get-rich-quick Spanish opportunists. This was the doings of a jealous Spanish bishop, de Fonseca, who continually undermined Columbus at the royal court. He thought it was a mistake that Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella gave so much authority to a non-Spaniard, that is, Columbus being just a low-class Italian. In this sense, Columbus was the victim of racial discrimination. The bishop is to be blamed for altering Columbus's goal from finding India and China to managing hundreds of ambitious settlers. Columbus was an amazingly gifted explorer, but unfortunately was unable to govern those forced upon him. Looking for a location for settlement, Columbus explored Puerto Rico and Jamaica. Arriving at the fort, they were shocked to find that the sailors Columbus had left the previous year were all killed by natives. Columbus unfortunately yielded to the Spanish' greedy demands and allowed them to set up a European-style feudal plantations. This tragically set a precedent for generations of mistreatment of native populations. Columbus eventually sailed back to Spain, leaving his 2 younger brothers Bartholomew and Diego in charge of Santo Domingo. Voyage 3. The Doldrums and Spanish Misconduct. On Voyage 3, Columbus sailed across the Atlantic further south and closer to the equator. This brought him through a stretch of sea called the Horse Latitudes and the Doldrums, where there is no wind for weeks at a time. When Columbus arrived back at his settlement at Santo Domingo, he found that the greedy Spanish settlers had rebelled against his brothers. They accused Columbus of misconduct and lying and imprisoned him and sent him back to Spain in irons. The king and queen, upon examining the charges and evidence, fully exonerated him, but did not reinstate him as governor. The 4th voyage, continued exploration. Columbus continued to search for the coast of Japan and China on his 4th voyage. During this trip, he was shipwrecked and stranded off the coast of Jamaica for a year. The tempest arose and wearied me so that I knew not where to turn. My old wound opened up, and for 9 days I was lost without hope of life. Eyes never beheld the sea so angry and covered with foam. The wind not only prevented our progress, but offered no opportunity to run behind any headland for shelter. Hence we were forced to keep out in this bloody ocean, seething like a pot on a hot fire. The people were so worn out that they longed for death. Columbus explored the coast of Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica, and he briefly landed in Panama. He returned to Spain in 1504 with compromised health from the many years that he had been exposed to harsh weather and hazards of the seas. He died in 1506, uttering the last words, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." His first voyage, he discovered land. His second voyage, he encountered a hurricane, malaria, and cannibals, which we'll talk about in a little bit. His third voyage, he faced the Doldrums rebellion and was arrested. In his fourth voyage, he survived another hurricane, explored Panama, and was shipwrecked on Jamaica for a year. Columbus is a giant and a hero of the ages. For 500 years, people have celebrated Columbus as an explorer and pioneer of courage and vision. There are over 600 statues and monuments around the world erected to honor him. The city of Washington, D.C. even bears his name. D.C. stands for District of Columbia, or Columbus. The name Columbia, derived from Columbus's name, was used during the American Revolution as a patriotic reference for the United States. The name Columbia was a female personification of Columbus. It was a term that was used to refer to the original 13 colonies and the entirety of the United States at various time periods. John F. Kennedy said this, "History, after all, is the memory of a nation. Just as a memory enables the individual to learn, to choose goals and to stick to them, and to avoid making the same mistake twice, in short, to grow, so history is the means by which a nation establishes its sense of identity and purpose." The American people are waking up to the fact that their history has been stolen from them. The people are waking up. Are you one of them? This is U.S. Civics Training. Thanks for listening.